Okay, here we are today with Nassim Haramein. He's a scientist and he's done wonderful discoveries and contribution for humanity. So we're going to talk about some very interesting things, but I want to start this interview first and foremost to thank him for all the so many years that he has given of his time to research about so many things that most of the people don't get it, like physics and everything, ancient civilizations and things like that. And from all the time that he's given to research, he's come out with very, very interesting and wonderful theories. And maybe one of the most important ones is the geometry of the vacuum. He has decoded, if you let me know because my scientific words are not exactly.
Yeah. Oh, good.
So decoded the Einstein field theory formula, or the unification theory field theory formula. What?
Yes.
Yeah.
Unification theory.
Unification theory.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So we're going to talk about those things.
Yes.
I actually want to start with. Trying to understand what is so important about the findings that you've made about the vacuum and the geometry of the vacuum. Because, most of us, lay people, we don't understand what the vacuum is. Mm-hmm. And worst of all, why is it so important to understand a geometry of a vacuum? What would geometry have to do with a vacuum, and in what way these two things together have any impact on humanity's consciousness?
Right. Well, that's a really good question. In physics, and certainly in quantum theory, when we looked at the space, when we looked at the vacuum inside the atom, and you could think of it as the space-time structure inside the atom, we found that it was actually fluctuating with almost an infinite amount of energy. That is, the vacuum at the quantum level is not empty at all, it's full. And as well, on the larger scale, on the cosmological level, when we looked at the vacuum of space, we found as well that that wasn't empty, that there's a force in there that's accelerating and expanding our universe. And so it's inaccurate to think of the vacuum as empty, although, the word vacuum kind of misleads us to think that it's nothing, right? Actually, it turns out that the energy in the vacuum is extremely dense. It's renormalized at 10 to the 93 grams per centimeter cube, but actually the equation says that it's infinitely dense. And so when I discovered this, it became apparent to me that maybe the vacuum, the structure of space, is what produced matter, instead of matter defining space, space defines matter. And when I started to think that way, all sorts of really amazing things came out of it. Like, one of them is starting to understand a unification of the forces. In physics, there's a big problem, that is that we have quantum theory to deal with the small stuff, and we have relativistic equation, Einstein's equation, to deal with the big stuff. But the two don't agree. And for the longest time, we've been trying to find a theory that makes the small stuff and the big stuff agree, because the big stuff is made out of small stuff. So there must be a theory that connects the whole thing. That would be a unified field theory. And it's really important, because if we understand how everything connects and how everything works together, then we can understand the fundamental principles of creation. And when we understand the fundamental principles of creation, we can develop technologies that could completely change our whole paradigm. I'm talking about like technology that can bring us to the stars, to in our solar system, all the galaxy, even maybe multiple universes.
So what is this unification theory about? I mean, what is the unification part of the theory?
Okay, well, without getting into too much details, when I start to look at the material world as a function of this energy that's in the space, you can imagine that if this energy in the space is infinite, and since there's a lot of space in the atom is 99.9999999% space. So that means the material world everywhere around us is actually mostly space. Then there must be infinite amount of energy in the atom, or infinite amount of mass, or at least a very large amount, right? And because of the vacuum energy, the fluctuation of the vacuum. And I start to realize that you could keep dividing the atom, getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller bits, and now we're making little particles that are billions of times smaller than the atom, and maybe we were just dividing the space itself, maybe we were just dividing the vacuum itself. That is, that the atom is just a function, it's a little oscillation of the vacuum itself. Like a vortex in a pool, where the water in the pool is the vacuum energy, and the little vortex is what we see as an atom, not knowing that it's actually made of the space itself. And when I started to think that way, the result was that the atoms start to look more and more like a singularity, like a black hole, like a point of infinite density, because it's infinitely divisible. And so I started to treat the atom as a mini black hole. And I wrote the math to describe that, a mini black hole that's exchanging energy with the space, with the vacuum, and the vacuum feeding back energy into it, so that you'd have a radiative side, the electromagnetic field, and a contractive side, the gravitational field. And when I started doing that, when I treated the atom as a mini black hole with Einstein's equation, the numbers came out right, meaning I was getting the right interaction time, the right decay, the right magnetic moment, and so on. And in the paper I'm just about to release, I solve more of these equations and show that you can get the exact right mass for the proton, for a black hole proton, where the black hole mass is inside the proton, but on the outside we measure a different mass because we're on the outside of the black hole. So we measure a much smaller mass, and so on. And so when you do that, all of a sudden you eliminate a lot of the problems that made it difficult to unify quantum theory with relativistic equation. All of a sudden you're treating the whole thing as a black hole structure.
So in one way or the other, the macro and the micro physics came together in a singularity point.
That's right, showing that every point is connected to all other points through the structure of the vacuum that surrounds and that's in everything.
Be like, you call it oscillation, can I call it vibration?
Yeah, vibration.
So vibration oscillation is more or less the same?
That's right.
So they are connected through vibrations, that we are all connected through vibrations.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So if we are made out of atoms, everything in the world,
mm-hmm.
All the material world that we call it material world, and human beings, we are made out of atoms. Then, if we are all black holes, then are we also a vacuum? Each person is a vacuum?
That's right. You're made out of 99.9999999% vacuum.
Well, maybe I'm a little more than yours.
And, and everything we see, and the only thing that makes it seem so solid is a little electromagnetic vibration of the space itself. And, the waves are colliding with each other, so it feels like it's solid and you can't go through it. But it's actually space vibration.
So eventually, somebody who dominates the energy can actually go through.
Oh yeah, actually, if you could match the phase of oscillation of your hand to the face of oscillation of this, you could put your hand right through it, absolutely.
And how would a person do that? Like, what does a person need to do? Because most likely we can do it more than the
table to us, yes. You know, this leads to really what is consciousness, and this is one of the interesting part of this series, that if you're describing everything as oscillating and feeding the structure of the vacuum, and then the vacuum feeding back information to the system, you have that feedback loop that describes consciousness. And when you, so then you realize that actually you are influencing the vacuum, you're influencing these oscillations. So somebody that would be really good at it, like a chi master. When people talk about chi,
like flying and dominating, like we see in the movies of the Oriental movies.
That's right. They do all this stuff.
That's possible.
Yeah, you know, there's been so many masters all around the world, like in all sorts of traditions, that have talked about this energy in the space. They call it chi or prana or mana and all this. And they learn to manipulate it. I can see that somebody could manipulate it strong enough that they could create a phase relationship so that they could put their hand through things. For instance, maybe masters that are healing people and putting their hands through people, that might be how they're doing it, if they're really doing it.
Now, like what you have discovered, the many 64 tetrahedrons interacting with each other in this specific formation that you showed us, the structure of the vacuum. In what way does it relate to the mystical, enlightened minds that understand this unification of everything, and that they don't, maybe they don't know the structure, they don't need to know the structure, they just know that that is true? Why do you think this is important to bring it out to the public, for them to know in a scientific way what you thought been able to prove?
Right, well, you know, like I said, many masters might have been able to manipulate the vacuum all this time throughout the ages, but by understanding that this is not some kind of esoteric woo-woo thing, that actually they're manipulating the physics of the universe, the way the universe actually works. When we understand these physics and we understand these mathematics, then it becomes available to everybody. Everybody can start to understand that they're influencing the vacuum and the vacuum is influencing them, and they understand the mechanics of it and all this. And our whole scientific community can understand how all this works. And then technologies can be developed to tap into the vacuum, to interact with the vacuum, to create gravitational field, to, you know, so not just a master in some cave somewhere can levitate, but you can levitate a whole spaceship, or you can, you know, all the things that you would think of as a very advanced civilization becomes possible.
This seems to be still quite far away from us, like levitating anybody, levitating, or even free energy. It's like, if you're talking about the vacuum and infinite energy for anybody to use, how far away do you see that we are entering into these new technologies, and how prepared is humanity to realize that we can actually go much further than what we've done and have free energy? Can you imagine what it is to live with free energy?
You know, to that question, I usually give an example.
Okay.
If you were to go to people on that famous lake where the Wright brothers, you know, on that beach where the Wright brothers flew the first plane, and you were to go to the neighbors there maybe 2 weeks before they did it, and you said to them, you know what? In 2 weeks, somebody is going to come here, and they're going to bring a device that weighs thousands of pounds. And just by moving the air around this device, the device is going to lift thousands of pounds and people with it into the air, they would have looked at you and said, "You're crazy. This is not going to happen. And if it happens, it's going to take thousands of years before we can do that." And actually, that was the belief of most of the scientific community at the time, actually all of it. There was many papers written all around the world by top physicists, mathematically proving that you could not lift things off the ground that way. That there was no way you could get air to create enough lift to lift a device on weight, right? That seemed impossible. Yet, 2 weeks later,
It happened.
It happened. And, you know, this is the thing about innovation. What seems impossible today becomes possible tomorrow. And what I think, if I look at our society, if I look at where we're at, if I look at our science and our physics and all this, I would say to you that not only are we extremely close to these new developments, some of them have already been done, meaning inventors all around the world have reported being able to extract or tap some of the energy in the vacuum for a fairly long time, and it's just not being possible for us to bring that in our society at this time. But I think we're really close, and our world is about to change dramatically.
Anyway,
yeah.